Again, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your taking the time to do this. And I thought I'd begin by asking what I think is a very obvious question about this topic, and that is sex in old age an oxymoron?
Oh, not at all.
No? Tell us about that. Lots of people, of course, think that sex fades away with age.
Yes, a lot of people really do think that, and a lot of people are daunted by it. But I'll tell you, my main goal today is to really encourage people to be able to see that there's many ways of having physically satisfying lovemaking, even in elder ages. And we're talking here with AARP, 50 to 150, right? So,
Year olds.
yes.
Yeah.
I haven't met the 150-year-old.
Yeah.
No,
Right.
I'm being
Well,
playful, but
yeah.
Yeah.
obviously, this is a more daunting topic a lot of times as people age, it's 70s, 80s, 90s than it is at 50.
Well, we have to think about it differently too. It's not the same as when we were young, that's for sure. So, that's some of what we want to go into, how to cultivate that sparkle between us, how to activate that energy, how to light the fire.
Let's talk about some of this.
Mhm.
I mean, you responded immediately by saying sex in old age is possible and can be very enjoyable. Uh,
Yes,
but
And,
there are some
and multifaceted.
but there are some changes that take place as people age, aren't there?
Yeah, of course.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yes, there is.
energy level is a lot lower, the libido is lower, the stamina is lower. There's a lot of changes.
Well, and anyone who has physical disabilities, and there's a number of those, we don't have to count them off, right? But that certainly can be a deterrent for people, but it doesn't have to stop them. And we'll, as we go along, talk about some of those ways that people can proceed.
Well, let's talk about that. You talk about physical disability. I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to. Erectile dysfunction certainly becomes more common with age. I shouldn't say certainly, you're the experts. I think erectile dysfunction.
Absolutely,
Of course, of
absolutely.
course.
Oh, yeah.
It's a rare male who doesn't at least experience some softness of erections and difficulty sustaining them as they age.
And
But
women are a lot drier. We have a lot less fluids going on.
So for women, you're saying the counterpart is dryness.
Yes, uh-huh.
Are there
Needing
the problem of erectile dysfunction is a pretty obvious problem, but what about for women? Is there a counterpart to that for women? Dryness?
Yeah, and the lower libido too. I mean, we're tired a lot of times, the sex isn't primary on our radar, but Jim and I have made it a priority. That's something that we really prioritize in our relationship, to be romantic, to be sexy, to flirt, to have orgasms. It's so healthy.
Mm-hmm.
it gives vitality and vibrancy. I just wanted to go back to something before we go past it, and that is the physical disability part. People have arthritis, they back problems, cardiac issues, for example. And a lot of times it does require physician's approval or consent to be able to have intercourse or to have, high stamina sex.
Or just the raised blood pressure. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So there's a lot to take into consideration to just make sure we're healthy enough for sex, but it doesn't have to be sex like intercourse, like how we're thinking about it. There's many other aspects to it. So that's some of what we want to unpack.
So elaborate on that, would you, Ruth?
Well, as we get older, I noticed that the old fashioned rising to a peak and then boom isn't the same rhythm that we're in. It's much more, there's an excitation and then there's some rest and snuggling and then there's some more excitation. It's like more of a tantra kind of style. I don't know if you're familiar with tantra, but it comes from a yogic tradition, which is, I'm a yoga teacher for many decades. And, in the Tantra tradition, it's much more about breath and connection and feeling what's real and not just going for a goal. It's not goal oriented. And so as we get older, that's a lovely system to just hang out together and feel when the energy rises and when it falls and not be attached to something has to happen.
It often.
Let me just go back a minute. You commented earlier that sex is not necessarily intercourse. I mean, this is counterintuitive.
Yeah, so I was just about to
We think,
address that.
we think sex, we think intercourse.
Exactly.
One of our presidents got to plead innocent because the sex he had wasn't intercourse, right? So
That's right. So we're really talking here. I mean, when I want to follow up on what Ruth was saying about Tantra, it can start as simply as eye gazing. It can be that simple, and that's connective. That gets people emotionally connected. Sensory stimulation, skin to skin contact of any sort. Couples can discuss with each other how they like to be touched or not touched. And, a lot of partners are seasoned. They've been together a long time. And so they already know these things about each other, but it doesn't help. It doesn't hurt to continue to dialogue about what pleases you.
well, you say this as if it's all pretty simple. Eye to eye communication. I I suspect that there are an awful lot of people who are uncomfortable with the intimacy of that, and that the intimacy, the passionate intimacy that they had at an earlier stage in their relationships can become difficult as they get older.
Good
Absolutely.
point. It's true.
Yeah,
And people could just start with a few seconds, but it does add to the intimacy. And it's a great way to start
So
and reconnect.
you're recommending what sounds like almost a kind of exercise for people. If you have a couple who's come to you and they're having problems in their relationship, which may be in being intimate, not just in having sex, but may be a problem of being intimate together.
absolutely.
Exactly right.
Emotional intimacy is the foundation for sexuality. If I don't feel safe, and if I don't feel connected, if I don't like you, I'm not going to want to have sex.
So it starts with conversation, really, before we talk about eye gazing for people uncomfortable with that. It's more getting them to be able to talk with each other, talk about their feelings, their desires, their concerns,
Fantasies.
How,
limitations.
how do you help people to do that? I mean,
Well, I think the primary thing, Michael, is that people have to prioritize their relationship. If their intimate relationship isn't high on the priority list, it's a moot point. So, it's like being able to get in the ballpark together and being able to have these dialogues or have these activities or have these pleasuring sessions. It's like, yeah, let's do this. Let's take this on. Let's feel closer. Let's feel juicier. Let's feel turned on. Let's feel sexy together. I mean, people have to prioritize that and say, I want that. So I
And
would start
I
there.
assume that you have people who come to you and you believe this is where they should be, they should get to be. How do you help them get there?
yeah, you're tracking my thoughts very well, Michael. We're in sync here. Uh, People vary. There's a whole continuum for everything in mental health. So you're right. Let's talk about the people that I think you're implying who are shy about this or are not used to dialoguing. One of the things they can do is just start to share their thoughts or feelings for a few minutes a day. That could be an exercise that they do. And
Mhm.
and they have free reign and not to be critical of one another, not to offer advice, but just to be able to say what's so for them. And then you can build up gradually into this kind of a conversation, starting with how do you like to be touched? And we can talk about their sexual history if they want to. A lot of people are still operating out of their conditioning, their religious conditioning or their parental conditioning.
Or trauma.
Hmm.
It's a lot of trauma around romance, love, sex. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about being able to encounter each other as an intimate couple. This is my partner, this is my life partner, and what would be pleasurable? What would be fun? What do I enjoy?
That
So let
creates
me
spark.
do two lines of questions with you, Ruth, following up on that. One is you mentioned that trauma is a frequent part of the lives of women, probably less so of men, but
You'd be
a lot of
surprised.
Men,
A lot of men
there's,
too.
women have had traumatic sexual experiences.
oh yeah,
Uh, so that's one thing. The other thing is you're talking at this point about people who have long relationships. And I'm wondering about uh, the,
Yeah.
Improving sex for people who are not in long-term relationships,
That's a
maybe
great
not in any relationship, maybe just beginning a relationship. So
Right.
can you,
Well, that's all the more reason to have those conversations and don't have the history. It's we have different questions that we ask, but people can ask, they can make up their own list of what do I want to find out about myself and what do I want to know about my partner? Like, what's important here? Do I want to bother? A lot of people don't want to bother with sex and romance and think it's, it's past for them. But we're saying plant the seeds, nourish them, let that grow in you. You'll be surprised. I mean,
Ruth, do that on a first date?
you're
Yeah.
on a first date and you don't want to bring up sex on the first date, most likely, unless
Well, you want to think about it, but or
yeah,
you are thinking about it, but it's a
yeah.
hard.
It's the teenagers who are doing the hooking up, more likely.
No,
Yeah.
not necessarily. Plenty of older people are. Yeah. So there's so many different aspects to this, but how do you talk about sex? That's the question you're asking. How do we talk about it? Whether we're on a first date or we're just starting a relationship, we're in it 6 months or 2 years, or how do we talk about it? So safety is really important because it's such a vulnerable topic. So how do we create safety with each other? How do we allow the other person to know that they can open up to us?
There's a whole other dimension here that we haven't really touched into, and that is getting to know each other and getting to re-spark the relationship if you've been together a long time. Or what do we do for fun? In-house, out of the house kind of dating, right?
Dating. We love
Activities,
dating.
yes. What are activities that people can do together that they would find enjoyable? And because when people say to me intimacy, and people often say, well, we were intimate last night. And I say, you know what? For me, intimacy is a broad term. And it covers all kinds of things: emotional intimacy, fun together, intellectual, philosophical conversations,
Spiritual intimacy.
silence.
Dreaming, building our dreams together. There's many aspects to this.
Tell them what you say about breakfast.
Oh, I just say sex begins at breakfast. If you're nice to me during the day, that'll be a likelier scenario that we could be intimate later than if you've ignored me all day or was rude or something. So, it's that safety, it's that feeling connected, like I can let down my guard. I mean, sexual activity happens when we're relaxed. If we're tight and tense and we've got all these walls up, it's very hard
Trying to perform.
Or try to perform, which is, yeah, some people do that. But, letting the relaxation happen through touching, through music, through taking a walk, through massaging each other, through holding each other, to giving each other foot rubs. There's just so many ways to connect.
And having a natural flow with it too. Not something that's scripted.
Yeah.
There's so many questions that I'd like
good.
to follow up on here. Let me just take one of them. Jim, you said that people will say to you, we were intimate last night. I assume that sometimes what they really mean is we had sex last night.
That's what they mean. Yes.
Right. And they're embarrassed to say we had sex last night. So instead they use this cover term.
Right. That's
we were
right.
intimate last night. And the fact is that they weren't intimate. They just had sex.
That could be.
And that's part of what I'm trying to convey.
Yeah.
Is that, and I find that if I can be explicit with couples, they often will be in turn. If I can do this unabashedly, they're often will drop their embarrassment as well.
That's the safety. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So helping people to relax, to connect, to feel like I like you. I want to be with you. I want to play. Sex is play.
So, I mean, that's certainly what you do in your practice is you have people who you're meeting with and you can talk openly in a way that encourages them to talk openly.
And also to facilitate them speaking to each other. I always have the couples turn to each other and talk to each other and say what they have to say. And I step back. So yeah, learning, it's a practice. These are new skills. A lot of people don't have these skills. We didn't grow up with this emotional vulnerability. It's a hard place to be when you're not used to it, especially as you age. There's more guardedness, there's more old stuff stored up, there's more wounds that are covered over and calloused over. So how do we let loose and play and have fun and bring pleasure into our
Right. And
lives?
can be some embarrassment about one's body, right?
Yes, the aging
Yeah,
body.
right. With these wrinkles we have, they're all
Cellulite, flab. Yeah. How do we
Well,
accept
let's pursue that for a minute. I saw a cartoon recently. I think it was in the New Yorker. It's a woman going up to her husband with a cotton swab in her hand. She says, "I want a DNA sample. You don't at all seem like the person I married."
I think I saw that too.
Who is this person? I know
Who is
there's a lot of
it?
rediscovery,
But there is that process that goes on.
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
assume that the two of you look different when you got married 50
No.
years ago.
53 years. We'll show you our wedding picture. Yep, we sure
You
do
know,
different.
I certainly look different when I
Yes.
got married 46
It
years ago.
requires acceptance, doesn't it?
Well, yes, I think it does. It also occurs to me that what is stimulating may change with age.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know if you find that, but
Yes.
I don't know that people necessarily continue to want the young, beautiful people as they become older. What do you think?
Well, there's fantasies, yeah. Well, you could fantasize having a young, beautiful woman. We do that kind of thing, fantasize. But yeah, I don't think it's happening. There aren't too many people hooking up that are a big age gap.
Well, they see beauty in other ways, like character lines, for example, right?
Yeah.
From a physical standpoint, but even looking beyond the physical, and especially people who have been together a long time.
So let me talk about one of the physical changes that we mentioned earlier, erectile dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
So that becomes more common, and there are, Ruth, you can speak for this, problems that women begin to experience as they age, postmenopausal issues, and
Right.
they come up. How do you deal with that? So here you are, Jim, me, men of a certain age who
Right.
have been virile until a certain point, and now it's changed.
That's right.
And as you said earlier, you don't have to have intercourse to have sex. How do you deal with all of that?
Well, one thing you need to do is be able to normalize it, realize you're not an aberration, right? That this is virtually everybody who gets to be that age, right, goes through this, especially as you get very much up in age. And so part of this is dealing with the psychology of it, that there's a change there, just like men don't like to lose their driver's licenses, right? We also don't like to lose our erections or have them be softer. So there are pills that people can take, injections, even implants or pumps, if they wanted to do any of that. And but some of this I'm implying is also psychological. It's coming to terms with, yes, I'm aging, and this is one part of aging. And then once again, looking for other ways of making contact besides just, let's say, intercourse, which becomes more difficult as people advance in age.
So can you elaborate on that at all? What is sex without intercourse?
Oh, so much. Yeah, there's all kinds of oral sex we could do. We went on this quest about, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago to educate ourselves. We could feel ourselves aging. And so we sent away for these. It was actually in the AARP magazine. It's called the Sinclair Institute. And it was a whole series of DVDs at the time. They probably have them online, but it was so educational, like to learn about our bodies and learn about pleasure and learn about oral different techniques weeks. It's like, I didn't know about that. I also went to a women's workshop on sex and had sex toys and learned all about the sex toys and learned so much more about orgasm than I ever knew before when I was it was probably in late 50s, 60s. And I was like, I didn't know that, right? The
Stimulating
legs.
the legs of the clitoris,
right.
Stimulating the G spot, but just licking and sucking and kissing and around the body can be very erotic for both parties.
And the good news is, Michael, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but in the Tantra study, there are orgasms all over the body. I could have an orgasm that's a body orgasm, or the head blows off, kind of feeling the opening of the top of the head. There's orgasms that aren't necessarily sexual.
Genital.
They aren't always genital. There's just like this wonderful wash of feeling so much pleasure and so much exaltation and so happy. And it doesn't have to be genital. So, it's like learning how to understand our body and unpack the pleasure in our body and the freedom in our body. When we're tied up with stress and conflict and weightiness, we're not free.
And expectations and the
performing.
Rules and, right. Yeah. You can hear her enthusiasm, right?
Yes, I certainly can.
It's freedom, it's the freedom to be.
So I understand, at least intuitively, a woman having an orgasm without genital stimulation. But Jim, how do men do that?
Yeah, and especially since men are so penis oriented, right? We're so genital oriented.
Yes, we are.
It requires a bit of a shift there. Now, again, sometimes men, and I'll speak for myself as well. I can, I don't have to have intercourse. I can have, manual or oral stimulation, right? And this is generally speaking, but men have to learn how to develop their erogenous zones as women have. To experience, sensation. I myself, I love sensual touch. I find that very, even massaging, scratching, those things are very, very.
Is it orgasmic for you?
Yeah,
I think you've had like when I head scratching.
Be careful there, Ruth. Be careful there. We're on television.
I was scratching his head. Yeah.
Oh well.
Yes, but seriously, I have said to her when she has a wonderful touch, no matter where she's touching me, I'll sometimes say, "This and milkshakes are as good as sex." I have said that several times, haven't I?
Uh-huh.
So let me change the topic somewhat. I actually don't know how much time we have left because I don't have a clock here telling me how far we are into this. But I wanted to talk a little bit. I'm sorry?
We're at 24 minutes, I see.
Oh, good. So we have 6 minutes left. And I did want to spend a little time talking with you about sex for single people. And for people who don't have someone to have a relationship with. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you deal with people in your practice who are sexually alone, but who want to have sex. But what can you tell us about that?
Well, I think it's a lot in the communication to be able to have that kind of agreement, the friends with benefits kind of thing, where people decide that they enjoy each other sexually, but they don't really want to have a relationship that's ongoing. So that's one paradigm. Another paradigm could be, I'm getting ready to be touched. I want to be touched. I want to do it in a safe way and something that's smart. And how could I engage in a conversation with a date or a friend or a person that I could say, I'm really hungry for making love again, to feel that stimulation again. Are you up for that? It could happen in a conversation, as well as setting the mood. Mood is a big thing. Just change the lighting, change the music, change the tone, just enter into that sexy space together. So, if people are you're saying if they're totally alone, how can they do that for themselves? Is that what you're saying?
One of the questions is if you have friendships that are non-sexual friendships, from what you're saying, you might want to say to somebody who's a non-sexual friend, why don't we become sexual friends?
Or experiment. It's an experiment, you know.
But there certainly are people who don't have friends with whom
Yeah,
that's a
true.
possibility. So
Yeah.
there's two lines of questions. One is, what advice do you have for people who want to find somebody
That's what I was going to address.
sex with? And then the other question, if we have some time, is having sex with yourself,
Yes.
masturbation. And
Yes, some
that-
people have religious constraints against that, which they carry all through their lives, and we wouldn't tell them otherwise. And from a psychological standpoint, it's a healthy thing. And I once heard a joke that 90% of men masturbate and the other 10% lie.
yeah.
Yeah.
But women also have learned to masturbate, and she could speak to
Oh,
that.
yeah.
But also, besides, and there's sex toys. Besides masturbation, though, there's going out into the community, finding meetup groups. Parents Without Partners comes to mind. People can Google these groups.
To
There's
go have sex with?
to meet people. To meet people.
Oh, just socializing,
Yeah,
not
well,
sexual
as a-
partners.
Yes, first of all, that's a first step for a lot of people.
Oh, right.
Most older people aren't willing to just go out and immediately have sex. So you have to find a partner.
Yeah. So how do you find people that you're feeling attracted to? Is that what you're saying? I mean, there's all the online dating.
What advice do you have for people who are interested in developing a romantic relationship but have not succeeded in meeting somebody so far? So lots of people now are going online and using
That's right.
those kinds of dating services. Your suggestion about Meetup, that's an interesting suggestion, it seems to me, too. That's a service where there are all sorts of groups of people who get together for various purposes.
Well,
Even
you
book
go
clubs.
well, you go for your interests. Meetup is about interest groups, a
Mhm.
hiking group or a book group or a bowling group or something like that. Yeah, that's true. And then there's also the part of preparing oneself for their beloved to appear. So if I've got a lot of baggage and a lot of old storage, I don't have a lot of room for the new person. So doing the personal work, really going into, what might be in my way, what am I afraid of, what are my resistances, what are my what ifs.
Clearing those barriers.
Yeah, clearing the barriers. And then, there's that dynamic pull between fear and hope. We're scared and yet we're hopeful. And so, it's a lot of personal work. We do a lot of that work. I've helped so many couples find their beloved, and, by imagining what it would be like, what's the lifestyle, what activities am I doing? What would I be doing a year from now with this person? How does that person feel in bed when I reach over and hold their hand? And so it's a lot of imagining.
And prioritizing.
Yeah, but I was just thinking about this one woman who used to imagine that she reached her leg over and they'd intertwine their legs, and she was single. She hadn't met him yet, but she met him. She called him in. She found him and he found her, and they've been happily married for a while. They were an older couple too. So I mean, I have a lot of those stories of how we prepare people for love, for romance, for allowing our hearts to open. We all carry around that stuff about not being enough, not being good enough, not, pleasing people. There's a lot of stuff there to clear.
And there's also just the thoughts. Thoughts manifest energy. And she's talking about that in a visual sense. I ask people sometimes just to prioritize, what are the main things you're looking for in a partner?
Yes.
Well, it may be that we're reaching the end of our time together today, and reaching it on a very hopeful note. Your comment about the balance between hope and fear, Ruth, strikes me as something that's very important for people to keep in mind. Fear is a great obstacle to relationships of any kind.
That's right.
And also, you were talking about meeting people through activities, essentially.
Yes.
And, if we think, for example, about depression at any age, it's heavily related to just being disconnected.
Yes.
Isolated.
Lonely.
Confronting that isolation, it seems to me, is one of the things that you would encourage people to do.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Precondition.
Feel connected. Our heart wants community. We want to feel connected and bonded and loved. We can express our love in so many different ways.
Well, it's a main contributor to depression in elderly people.
Yeah.
Well, I've found this conversation very interesting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you as well. I think it's a lot of useful ideas here for people who may very well be having, as many people do, difficulties with intimacy and sexuality in old age. Joining us today.
Thank you for stimulating questions.
Yes,
We
this
enjoyed
was really fun. Thanks so much.
Well, good.